For this video, I'm working off of 21 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. We're now going to dive in and start shading the character. First, we'll cover the head, then move up to the hair, and then focus on the ponytail. We're going to apply a mask when doing this, just like we did with the shirt details. So let's come down here to the head, and we can create a new vector. And we'll place this above the head, and we can rename it to Shade, and then hit Enter. Now, using the Add Point tool, let's come up here to the top and enable Autofill. We can leave Auto Stroke turned off, as we're just going to use the fill properties for the shading. Next, come over here to the Fill, click on that, and there are a number of ways you could apply this. You could sample the skin tone and then drop the brightness down to create a darker shade. Or we can apply using a black color and then drop the opacity down depending on how much you want to shade the character. I'm going to use this method simply because I might end up changing the colors near the end here. And if you do that, by going this route, you'll be able to adapt the shading to whatever color changes occur. So I'm just going to bring it up to about here to start, and we can adjust this as we see fit, but we're just going to start somewhere and then go from there. I'm just going to come in and we'll start drawing up here a little bit, and then come in and just bring it down, and it's going to taper off near the center of the chin like that, and then we can just wrap it around, and it's going to cover the ear as well, and then we can just bring it up and around and release. So now if we click off of it, we're going to see just how dark this looks. And I think it's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to just click once, go into Fill, and then drop the opacity. And the good thing about this is you can see this update in real time, allowing you to pick the perfect shade for your character. So let's go right about here with the alpha, and then I can click OK. So there we go. To mask this, we simply need to come down and select both the shade and the head layers, right-click, and group with selection. We can rename layer 7 to head and hit Enter, double-click, go up to your masking, and then choose to hide all, and then hit OK. Finally, let's double-click on head, go to masking, and exclude the strokes, and then click OK. So there we go. We now have some shading applied to the head. And we could go in and make a couple of adjustments. I might move that up just a little bit. And coming in here, we could also do other things if you feel it's appropriate. But for right now, I think this is looking okay. So now we'll follow a similar procedure with the hair. Let's collapse the head and come up here to the hair. And we will create a new vector, and we can name this one Shade, and then hit Enter. Taking the Add Point tool, I'm just going to retain the same fill properties. I'll start right here and just kind of come down like this to create an edge, and then come over and then up, and just kind of work around these two bumps up here. So like this. And come over and up. And here we're just going to encompass the whole side of the head or the hair, just like this. And come down and then wrap it around. And then we're just going to bring it back up and apply it like so. So it looks something like that right now. But I want to apply a few more shapes to this. I'm just going to bring these points in a little bit, and I'm going to correct the curvature here soon. But we'll grab the Add Point tool once again, and I'm just going to start drawing. So we'll start here, and I'm just going to come down and shade in this particular strand of hair. Just going around the edge like this, and I can wrap down and around. And once again, you just got to be careful with where you're creating your shapes here. So I want to create two separate vectors for this. I'm just going to come in and get as close as I can and then connect this. Once you connect your points, we can come in with the Transform Points tool and just move in, and then even use the Curvature tool to correct some of this. I might actually come in here and just move that point, and then create another point, move that in and up and out like so. And that's not looking too bad. Of course, this part right here will be eliminated once we do the masking, and it'll be easier to see what's going on. But let's just continue to add in the rest of the shades here. And starting right about here, come up and create a bottom shade for this area. Just going through like this. Come down right like that, and just come around, and we can connect it. So we have a shade there. Let's add a shade right here, just for this part, just to add a little bit of depth to this strand of hair. Just like that. And I can actually come in with this one and just move it in like that. And I probably will adjust the curves here soon, but let's just keep adding in the rest of the shades. So coming in here, let's begin just by scooting that one back. And once again, to add depth to this, we're just going to add a little bit of shading going down and just going around like this, going all the way down, just like that. And then we can wrap this one up and around, and we'll just kind of go like that and place that one right there. You can make any adjustments you feel is needed, just as long as this part of the hair is shaded, you should be good to go. Coming up here, I might do just a couple more shades to add a little bit of depth. So I could do one right here. Perhaps one over here. Do one right there. And I think that's looking pretty good for right now. Let's just zoom out. And of course, this is looking a little bit off. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to click on Shade, hold in Shift, click on Hair, right click, and then Group with Selection. Go into Layer 7 and rename that to Hair. Double click on this layer and go into your masking. Choose to hide all, and then hit Apply. You can see now it's properly masking out the different areas for the shade, so everything is looking pretty good. I'm just going to come over here really quick and click on Hair, and then come down to Exclude Strokes, and then click OK. So that way we have that one already in place, and everything is properly masked. So from here, I could go in and just do some cleaning up with the shades. And maybe just bring some of this in a little bit. Bring some of that down, taper it off a little bit more. Just kind of make it a little bit more stylized. Same with this part. You could just kind of taper this more so it's fading in more as we go in with that line. And everything else is looking pretty good. We could probably do a little bit more shading in these areas. So if we come in, I could just quickly add in some details like this. And you got that going on now. But the next part for the hair is to add in just one more layer of shading. So we have one layer here. I'm going to click and choose vector from the list, and I'm just going to add shade 2 to the list. And we're just going to keep going. So I'm just going to come in and add a little bit of a darker shade here to the outline. So just coming in here, I'm just going to follow this down. About like that. And bring it up. And down. And when I release, you can see it's darker. Because it's transparent, we have that darker effect already kick in. And I might just bring these things in a little bit more. Just like that. And again, you could go into more details. You could add more points here if you wish for the detail of the shading. But for right now, I think it'll work. So if we click off, we can see now it looks something like that. And you can keep doing this. So if you go into any area you feel you want to have that extra depth, once again, on shading 2, I can just come in here and quickly trace this line, create something like this. Perhaps come in here and just move it up a little bit so it's out of the way. And if you click off, you can see now it looks like that. And I might just reduce it even more just by coming in here with these points and just shrinking everything down a little bit. So we have that now. And I'll do one more area here. We'll just go to shade 2, and right here where we have the strand, I'm just going to create another darker shade right about here. Let's bring it down like that. And we can adjust it a little bit. Bring it in, do whatever we need to do. And the final thing we want to do for this video is shade the ponytail. This again is going to require a mask. You'll find the ponytail within the body group, even though we consider it part of the head. Let's create a new vector. We can name it shade. And then taking the add point tool, we're just going to come in and then place down some shading. So just like this should be fine. We'll have the rest of this just covered in this shade. I can come up like this and around and release. And actually looking at this, I might just scale this back a little bit and maybe add in a little bit of detail with this by adding in a couple more points. I could maybe bring something up like that. Just kind of have it come down. Maybe even just make it a little bit sharper like that. And now we have something that looks like this. And once again, we just need to quickly put this into a group by selecting both of those layers, right-clicking, and choosing Group with Selection. Click on Layer 13 and rename it to Ponytail, and then hit Enter. And then, of course, we're going to mask this, as well as come in and exclude the strokes for the ponytail. There you go. We now have shading for that applied as well. So with the shades applied to the head, we're going to pause here and up next, move on to shading the body. For this video, we are working off of 22 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. We're going to move now to the body and keep adding our shades. But first, let's come over here and click on the neck, and we'll quickly add in a shade for this, and then move down to the collar and then the body. So coming over here, we're just going to follow a similar procedure from last time. And again, you could add these shapes to the existing vectors if you wish, but I just find this to be easier to mask this out. So we're just going to use the Add Point tool. Come in here, can add a little shade right here, and release. And I'm still using the fill properties from the last video with the shading color. And if you need to, you can always go in and reduce the transparency of black until you match up the shading as you see fit. If you come over here and eyedropper this, you're just going to grab this grayish color versus actually grabbing the alpha properties. So keep that in mind if you plan to use the eyedropper to jump back and forth. But now I just want to come in here and maybe round that off a little bit. Perhaps move it up and just mold this about like that. Should be fine. And we can properly mask this just by going over here and grouping. And then we can rename this to neck. Double click, go into masking, choose hide all, hit OK. Double click, go into masking, and you can always hit apply and then jump to neck without having to redo this step, but sometimes I forget about that. Just exclude the strokes on neck and then click OK. Now we can move down to the collar. And once again, we're just going to add in a quick shading effect for this by creating a new vector, naming it shade, grabbing the Add Point tool, and then coming in, and I'm just going to do something like this. We can come up, and I can go around. Let's go down, and I might come down like this to the bottom, but then kind of wrap around like that and bring it up and then kind of down like that. And then from there we can cut it off by coming over here like this and applying it. I'm going to mask this first and then correct the shape. So I'll select them both and group them with a selection and name it collar. Double click to go into the layer settings, set your masking to hide all, and then hit apply. Go to collar, exclude strokes, OK. So now that has been properly applied. And looking at the shading here, we can make a couple of adjustments. Just coming in here, I might drop this down a little bit so that the shading here tapers off. We can add a little bit of a highlight here later. And then I'm just going to grab this and move it down so we kind of taper that out a little bit. And then moving over here, this isn't looking too bad. I might bring this out more and grab the curvature tool and create more of a straight edge for this part of the shading, just like that. And actually, I know I probably should have done this before, but I'm going to go back to that collar layer and just add a little line like this, extending out from the collar. And then we can create a shape or a stroke line to kind of extend that line out like that. And that can kind of help with the shading then. And we don't need it out that far. In fact, I'll probably bring it in more like this. So something like that. And then you have your shading right here. And I might bring the shade out more to kind of go along with that line like that. And then let's bring this up a little bit more. And maybe bring that one down like that. There we go. So that's looking a little bit better. We zoom out, we can see the shading has been applied now to the neck and to the collar. So now let's move on to the body. First, we're going to add a shade to the back, much like we did with the hair and the head. So let's hide the front arm. That way it's easier to see. And let's go down to the coat, and I'm just going to drop into that group, and we're going to create a new layer. So we'll add a vector on top of everything else, and we'll name it shade, and then hit enter. This is currently masked, so we should be able to go in and just start working with this. I'll start with my shape right down here. I'm going to start right below the collar so we can add a little depth to that by adding in a shadow. And then we can wrap around and start to drop this down and follow along the back end here and kind of go down like that. And then we can wrap up back and around. And there we go. So we can click off and we have something that looks like this. We need to come in here and play with our points and the curvature. So I might drop this down to about there and then come in and play with this. Take my Alt key and just bend these separately to get a sharper edge on that shade. And I can also extend this out a little bit as well. So now moving down here, everything is looking pretty good, except for this final part. I might just straighten that out so it's not bowing as much. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. I'm just going to add a couple more shades here. Let's come over here to the other edge of the coat. And I just want to add a very thin shade on this side. So still on that shade layer, or you can do a new layer if you wish, but I think using the same layer is fine. I'm just going to come down here and create a second shape. I can wrap it around like so. Bring it up, and there we go. So if I click off, we can see it looks like that. So the masking is working. But now I just want to go back into this layer really quick and use the curvature tool, holding an Alt. We can move things like that and like so, just to kind of get everything in line. If we come back out, we can see we now have a thin shade line applied to that side. Also looking at this, going back here to the collar once again, I might come in here and play with this line placement. If I grab this, I can move it back, kind of like so, and then maybe even drop this one down like that. Now we have this line right here, and that's not good. So maybe what I'll do is just come over here to the Hide Edge tool and grab that and click on this line to hide it, but we still have the shape. So now we kind of have this little dip with the collar, and it goes with the shading. So you have something that kind of looks like that now. And it just kind of helps fill out that shape for the collar even more. And going back now to the coat, I just want to add a couple more shapes for the shading. Just right on the bottom here. I can come in, and I can even connect it to this one. That's fine. And just come down and around and just connect it like that. And I'm going to do the same over here. Just come in, come down, and connect it. And then using the Create Shape tool, just select that shape, holding in Shift and lassoing all the points that you want to create. And we're just going to fill this in. We're not going to use the stroke. We can create a shape, and we can do the same thing over here. Create a shape. Then using the curvature tool, just straighten this out so it bends along with the coat, and same with that side as well. And then we can dip this down just a little bit, and that's looking pretty good. So now we have shading applied to the body, to the coat in this case, and it's starting to look better, more polished. I'm going to pause here, and up next, we'll keep applying shading. For this video, I'm working off of 23 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. We're now going to finish off shading the rest of the character. First, let's start with the pelvis. So I can zoom down there, and I want to find the pelvis on the layers panel. We're going to add a shade layer above pelvis, and using the same shade properties from the last video, I can come in and start applying my colors. And I'm going to do a couple underneath the coat to start, just to, again, highlight depth for these objects. So we'll come up and do something like this and release. Take a look at the color here, and that's looking pretty good. So then move over here, and we're just going to apply a shade going down like this and over. And then we're just going to wrap around and down like this, about right there, and just come up around and release. Now we can take the curvature tool, come in here and start to alter the way this looks. I can bend this down and create a straighter edge for the shading. Now, it's not going to really matter right now because the leg is in the way, so we're going to correct that in a moment. Let me just come in here and alter the lines over here and just try to get this shored up as well. So we can just bring these points in and back, and that's looking pretty good. So let's jump over here to the front leg, and I'm just going to take these points, click, and move this one down as well as that one. That will then help with the shading, as you can see, makes for a more natural transition. And then from this shade, we can move over to the leg and add the shade down like that, which is what we're going to do right now. So let's just make sure, you can see as I'm adjusting the bends here, it's altering the shape of the leg. So let's just keep it about like this, maybe a little bit higher. There we go. And I want to add a shade layer to the front leg. So I'm just going to click once and add a vector, name it shade, and hit enter. And we're going to create a very simple shade effect by taking the shape tool with S on the keyboard and selecting the rectangle. And I'm just going to start right here and move the shade down like so and release. Now I don't have autofill enabled, so I can just select this entire shape, use create shape, make sure fill is enabled, and then click create shape. And you can see now we have created that shape and it's looking good. Of course, we need to mask. I kind of forgot about that part, so we will get to that soon. Let's just move down really quick and cover this part, and then we can create that mask. So jumping back here to the shade layer, we can keep going with this shade if we wish. So I'm just going to add a point to that original shade and just kind of move it down like that. And then move this one down like so. And we can kind of just move it out like that if we wish. So it looks something like that. And then taking the curvature tool, we can maybe just bring it in a little bit. So we have that now. And then we have the foot. So I'm just going to move down here to the leg and foot. And we're going to create another shade. Take the add point tool. I'm just going to create a shape that goes down like this. And then just kind of over like this and down. And we'll just kind of create something that goes like this, and then over, and then down. Just again, to add a little bit more depth to this. Maybe bring it over a little bit, all the way to the end. And we can kind of just darken the bottom and bring it back and around and go up and over and click it into place. So now we have a shade that's going to look like this. We can go back through and make our corrections, but let's first go through and mask everything. That way it's easier to tell what's going on. Going back here to the pelvis on our list, we'll select the shade in the pelvis and group them together. Rename the group to pelvis. Double click on the layer to go into the settings. Go to masking, choose hide all and apply. Go to your pelvis, exclude the strokes and apply and click OK. Now for the front leg, you can see that we have two shades for this. So we're just going to make two separate groups. So for shade 1, we can just come in and group this with the front leg, rename it to front leg. Same with your front foot. Just come in and rename that one to front foot. Double click on front leg to open up your layer settings. I'm going to select both front leg and front foot and then choose to hide all and then hit apply. So that'll mask both of those and then I can hit OK. And we can do the same for the front leg and front foot. I can double click to go into the front leg properties and then use Command or Control if you're on Windows and select the front foot so we can select two of those layers at once. Go over here to masking and just choose to exclude all strokes and we can hit apply and hit OK. And everything is good to go now. So we have a shade applied for this and it's not looking too bad. But we might want to go in and just double check to make sure all the curves are how we want them. For instance, I could see myself just adjusting this a little bit, make this a straighter edge. Kind of bring it up like that. And let me come down here. Kind of bring these things out a little bit. And I'm just going to use Alt to create a point, sort of like that. And we'll do a straighter edge down here as well. Let's come in and get all that shored up, just like that. And there we go. So now we have the shade applied for that, and it's looking pretty good. Finally, let's add a quick shade to the front arm. I can just jump back over here to my layers. Let's just collapse the head so it's easier to see what's going on here. We can reveal the front arm, which is already masked. Let's just go into the front arm, and above front arm details, we can create a new vector, name it shade, and then grab the add point tool. And we just kind of want to continue off of this other shade. So we'll kind of start like that. And we're just going to bring this all the way down. Bring this over and then over and just kind of wrap it around like so. Take our curvature tool here, hold an Alt, and I just want to straighten everything out. Just like that. Except for this part up here, we kind of have this little curve going on, and that's okay. Kind of just like that. And that kind of rounds off into the arm then. We can maybe move that a little bit more. That's looking a little bit better. Maybe just come in here and adjust the curvature a little bit at the top here since it's tapering a little bit more than I would like. So I can kind of just come in here and make those adjustments. There we go. Okay. Oops, not that. There. We now have the shading applied for the arm. With the shading applied, we now have more depth with the character. We're going to pause, and up next, we'll jump over and start applying highlights. For this video, I'm working off of 24 Chad vector. Feel free to open up this file. We're now going to dive back in to the head, going back to the beginning of this section essentially, and we're now going to apply highlights instead of shades. Let's start with the hair. There's going to be less highlights than shading with this character, and so there's more highlights in the hair than the head. So that's a good place to start. Let's locate the hair. So under head, we can find hair and drop that down. We have 2 layers of shading. Let's go into that group and make a new vector, which we can name highlights, and then hit enter. So now let's just move over here, and I'm going to grab the add point tool. And for my fill color, instead of using black, we're going to go all the way up to white. And it's going to be slightly transparent like the shading. I'm not sure if we're going to keep it here, but once we start drawing, we should be able to tell. Let's go right here. I'm just going to draw in a little highlight on this bump of the strand. So just come up and around and down and release. So now I can reshape this just really quick to something a little bit easier to work with. And if we take a look at this, it's looking pretty good. I would say the alpha is good for this. And I could adjust the shape using the curvature tool, but for right now, I'm just going to apply the rest of the highlights as I see fit. So I'm just going to come in here, just kind of add some highlights to emphasize different parts of the hair. So just like that. And then I can come in, maybe add one like that, and another one down like this. There we go. Coming back up here, we're just going to keep moving along here. Oops, we don't want to do that. There we are. Add in one right here. And I might come in later and adjust how these lines are appearing. I can already see that. I might do some different things in the polishing stage, but for right now, it's okay. You can come in and apply one right there. And we could do a couple more there, but we're going to keep the highlights more on this side, I think, because that's where the light source would be comparatively with how we have everything going on with the shading. So let's emphasize this strand a little bit. We can maybe add one over here. One right about there. Right here. And let's do one right here. Okay. So now I could go through and using my curvature tool, start to bring some of this stuff in. So it's a little bit more streamlined. So there we go. Maybe just bring this up a little bit. Bring it closer to the edge. There we are. And I'll do the same with this one as well. Bring that one to the edge, as well as that and that. And then we have these spots over here. And these are looking pretty good. Again, you can play around with the curvature settings with this, but I don't think it's looking too bad. Okay. So I think that's good for the hair. We don't have any highlights for the ponytail since it's behind everything. The most we'll have for the light source is right there. So with that complete, we can move over to the head. I'm just going to collapse the hair, go down to the head, and create a vector. Name it highlights, and then hit enter. And we'll create a thin highlight on the edge of the head, kind of like how we did with the shading on the other side. But I'm just going to come in here and add in that slim highlight and kind of go down like that. Up and over and release. There we go. And we already have a mask on here, so that works to our advantage. We can come in here now and just shape this up and get it where we need it to be. So there we go. This one appears a little bit less vibrant. So if you wanted to, you could also come in here and click on the fill and maybe just adjust the highlight a little bit more for this one. Maybe putting it right about there, and that should be good. And we could add some more highlights here. I could come in and just looking at this, we could add a highlight right here for the nose, like that. And we could add in a highlight on the nose itself, right about there, making sure we create a shape for that so that we fill it in. And we can put in some highlights down here, just around the lips, something like that. And again, making sure those are filled in. We can go ahead and do that. So this is looking pretty good. I can just step back, and I think the last thing we need to apply highlights to is the eyelids. So we're just going to move in to the eyes really quick, and I'll jump to the top eyelids, and we can make a new layer for this, and we'll just name it highlights. And I can move in, and I'm just going to add a quick highlight right here, going up like this and down. And I'll adjust the curvature of that here. We'll just select all the points for this and start to bring the curvature settings in to a peak. And then I'm just going to shrink this in a little bit. And I'm just going to bring that up like that. There we are. So you have something that's looking like this. There we go. Okay, so with that in place, and I actually might add just a couple points here. That way I can bend this over like that a little bit easier. So with this in place, we're just going to select all the points and then use Command C and then Command V to paste. And I'm just going to move the highlight over right about there. Maybe over a little bit more like so. And then just move it down like that, so it's not overlapping the eyelid at the top. And I'm also going to move the highlights layer here above the bottom eyelids, so that way I can just use this layer for both. And I'm just going to select these both, Command C, Command V, and then at the top we can flip vertically and then just bring this down like so. And then just bring it up like that. There we go. So now we have highlights for the eyelids. And again, that kind of helps make things pop a little bit more. So there you go. Highlights have been applied to the head and hair. For this video, I'm working off of 25 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. We're going to continue building up the highlights for the character by focusing now on the body. The first thing we can do is add a small highlight to the collar. Let's come over here to the collar group, and we can drop it down. And above the shade layer, we can create a new one and name it highlights. Using the add point tool, we're just going to come in and I'll apply a small shade, or I should say a small highlight, to the edge, just like this. And I'm going to also highlight this edge just by coming in and applying my points like so. So we can come down like this and over and over and down. So now if I release, we have something that looks like this. The shading seems a little bit too dark right now. And again, that happens going from different colors. So I want to click on both of these shapes using my shift key, using the select shape tool, and then come over here to the fill color and then just drop the opacity down a little bit. So maybe about right there. That's more appropriate. And then I can click OK. Taking the curvature tool, we can come in now and just holding an Alt, make our adjustments. Maybe taper that one out a little bit like that. And just keep moving. Coming down like this. There we are. And then over here, I don't think we have to do too much with this side. Maybe just bring that part in a little bit. There we go. So now we have a slight highlight with the collar. Moving on to the coat, we're just going to do similar steps here. And again, we really wanted to focus on the face with the highlights, but we can add just a couple of different areas where we can highlight, especially like the edge of the jacket, which will just help make it pop more. And that's where we'll start, is on this edge right here. Coming over here to the coat, we'll create that new layer above shade and name it highlights. Then grab the add point tool and just come in and come down. And you can make your adjustments just like this. And release. And we can come in and just kind of shore it up. So it's just a really thin edge going along the side here. There we are. When we click off, we can see we now have that highlight. And again, it just kind of helps make everything pop a little bit. And now we're going to do the same thing on the left side. I'm just going to come in and apply these points, adding this thin highlight right here. And just coming in. And again, it doesn't have to be much of a highlight. Just a little bit can help with the depth of all this. So just come up like that. And now we have something that looks like this. The highlight right here is kind of intersecting the shading. So what I might do on that bottom point is just come up and just bring that up a little bit. And then as far as that little bubble is concerned, I can just come in and straighten it up using the curvature tool. And the same for this part right here. You can just kind of come in and straighten that up. So that way it's not intersecting with that shading on the bottom. And I guess I did the same thing down here as well. So let's just make sure it's not intersecting. Just kind of come up like that. And just a small change. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. There we go. There we go. So now we have that set up. Highlights are in now for the coat. And we could do some more highlights if we really wanted to, but I think that should be good for our purposes. But we can now move over here to the front arm. And we're just going to add in just a very quick layer, kind of like we did with the shading on the arm. So coming up here to front arm, we can locate shade and then just add a vector above it. Name it highlights, or highlight, I guess in this case would be more appropriate. And this time I'm going to grab the draw shape tool and we will use a rectangle with autofill turned on. And I'm just going to draw out a rectangle like this. Take the transform points tool and just rotate it so it's like that, and then bring it over. And then we can kind of line up the angle a little bit better and bring it in more just to create that highlight. And we can modify this now once we have it in. So I'll come down here to the bottom, and for the add point tool, let's turn on sharp corners just to make this a little bit easier. And I'm just going to add in a few points like this. I'm going to bring that one out and bring this one up. Let's kind of bring this over a little bit like that and add in a few more points right here. And just bring that over like that. Guess I had a few more points than I actually needed, but that's okay. We can kind of just come in and get it all straightened up like this. So there we go. We now have a highlight for that arm. If we click off, we can see what it currently looks like. And we can do the same now for the bottom. Just coming down here. First, we can add a small highlight to the pelvis. Let's come down to the pelvis and just create a new layer. Name it highlights. And grab the add point tool. Once again, we're just going to continue adding to this edge, so I can come down beyond this shade right here and then just add in a brief little highlight like that. And you can see it looks like this. Now, I can jump over here to the leg, which is going to be front leg. Make a new vector. Name it highlights. And then coming in, we're just going to come down and add a nice shape for this highlight. So we'll go right there. I can move this over, kind of come down like this and over to the edge and then down. And then I'm just going to loop back up. Go all the way up here and connect. So now when I click off, we have a highlight that looks something like this. And just zooming in here, I'm going to grab this point and bring it down so that the stroke hides it, and I can even bring that out a little bit to have that taper effect a little bit more gradual. So now you have that. And I would say now we are good with the highlights. If we hit Command R or Control R, if you're on Windows, we can bring this up and you can see now it's looking much more lively with the shading and the highlights. We of course need to add in the back limbs. Now that we have the shading and highlights in place, that is going to be easier. So we'll pause here, and up next, we will duplicate the front limbs. For this video, I'm working off of 26 Chad vector. Feel free to open up this file. We now need to take care of the back limbs. Up to this point, we haven't touched them. And that's because why not just duplicate them? But why not duplicate them when we have everything else in place, such as the shades and highlights? So from here, I'm going to come down and click on the front arm, come over here, and we're going to choose to duplicate the layer. I'm going to name this b.arm, and then come into the layer details here and also change this to b.arm details and b.arm, so that way there's no confusion as to what this is. Next, I want to come over here to the top bar with the transform layer tool selected and flip horizontally. And then we can simply bring the arm over and line it up with the sketch as best as we can. Now, we need to bring this below the body. So let's come over here and just hide some of these layers so we have an easier time seeing what's going on. The back arm should be below the pelvis, so we're going to drop it down there. And if we come over here, we can move this up so that it's closer to where it needs to be with being connected. And there we go. We can now come in and duplicate the front hand as well. So we'll just duplicate that, front hand too. Let's just bring it down so that it's below back arm. I'm just going to flip it and bring it over like so. And again, we're going to make changes to this here in the final polishing stage, so that way it looks more appropriate for the back arm. And let's also come down here and change front hand to back hand, again, just so there's no confusion. And then you have the front leg. We're just going to duplicate that, name it back leg, drop down our layers and just name that bottom layer back leg as well. That way, again, if you need to search, it'll pop up, and we can bring this below the pelvis. And then we're just going to move it over and get it where it needs to be. And the same for your foot. So we have b.foot. Let's bring it below the leg. Make sure we change the bottom layer name to b.foot. And then I'm just going to move it over and then up so that it connects and it looks appropriate and symmetrical with the front foot. And there we go. At a glance, the only thing I see that we need to polish are the hands. But we're also going to go in and look at all the line work and make sure that it's where we need it. Because as I've been working with this, I see that the lines are pretty thick. And so I might go ahead and adjust those in the final stage. But right now, the character design is pretty much complete. It just lacks polish. So we're going to pause here, and in the next section, it's going to be about polishing and wrapping up this project. For this video, I'm working off of 27 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. This is pretty close to being complete, but there are some things we can polish up, such as the hands and the line work. If we zoom in a little bit more, you might recall throughout this course I mentioned I might go ahead and reduce the line size, and I'm going to do that right now. So starting with the head, let's go into the hair group and locate the hair layer. Next, using Q on the keyboard, I can select the Select Shape tool and come over here and click on the outline. And when I do this, it's going to select those detail lines I put in. So here we can come in and enter in 3 and hit enter to reduce the line width. I want to do the same for the hair itself, so I'll click on the hair fill, come over here and enter in 3 for line width, hit enter, and we are now good with the hair when it comes to the line width. And there are other things I want to go in and do with the hair, such as polishing some of the line work within that layer. But for right now, let's just jump over here to the head. And under the head group, click on the head itself, select the head with the Select Shape tool, and then enter 3 for the value. The ear is counted as a separate shape, so I can come over there and click on that, enter in 3, and hit enter. For the assets inside the head, we're going to reduce the line width to 2. That way, the outline is more bold for the character and the details appear finer. And then we'll reserve the wrinkles for a width of 1. So let's come over here and make sure everything is adhering to that. First, if we click on the eyebrows, we can zoom in. And using the Select Shape tool, I can click on 1 and just come over here. We'll reduce it to 2. and reduce that one to 2 as well. And then going inside your eyes, we have the eyeballs right here. You can just come in, click on each one, and enter in the value that you wish to have. In this case, it's 2. And we're going to do the same for the eyelids. So just come in and enter 2. Same for that one. And then you have your bottom eyelids. So you just come in and you're good to go. And the pupils don't have an outline, so we don't have to worry about that. We do have those wrinkles, but those are currently set to 1. And so we're good with how those are presented. The nose is also at a width of 2, so it looks the same as the eyes. And then we have wrinkles around the mouth, which is set to 1, and that works. And coming down here to the mouth, we can adjust the width. So let's just go into that opening and taking the select shape tool, I can adjust the width to 2. And we can change the tongue to 2. And you have top teeth. And then we have the bottom teeth. And there you go. Let's keep moving down. I'm just going to move out and go down now to the neck. So going into the body group, I can locate the neck. In here, we can just come in, once again, reduce it to 3. For the collar, you can come in and reduce it to 3. And then you have your front arm, your coat, your shirt. You might have to hide your coat in order to see it. So let's click like this. We can reduce that to 3. Next, for the shirt design, let's go in. I'm just going to select all the shapes, and you can do this by clicking and holding in Shift. And we're going to reduce that to 2 since it's inside of the shirt, and I think that'll help with the consistency. And you can see that the collar line is also set to 2, which helps. So now we can bring the coat back, and we have something that looks like this. If we go to the coat details while we're here, we can also go into the line work and take a look at this. And everything is set to 2 as well, which works for what we're doing here. Now I'm going to move down and focus on the pelvis. Just moving down, you have the pelvis right here. Come in and really quick, we can just reduce the width to 3. And then you have your front leg. Let's come in here and reduce it to 3. And then you have your foot. And you have a few shapes for this. So if you wanted to, you could just come in here and take the Create Shape tool and select the whole thing, reduce the line width to 3, and create your shape. And that should put the line width down. And then you have the back foot and leg. So come in here, the back leg, we can just change that to 3 and hit enter. And then for your back foot, just come in. And once again, we can just use the Create Shape method, put it to 3, select the stroke, and apply that effect. I also forgot to do the hands, so we'll just jump right back up here and first locate the front hand. And we'll just come in here and make sure it's set. And actually, it looks like we just need to bump it back a little bit to 3. And that's looking pretty good. Come down here to the back hand. And we'll also set that to 3. And then the ponytail. Just come in here. Make sure we scale all the lines and everything back. Just like that. Now, you could save yourself some time by creating different styles while you're drawing. And honestly, that's something I just have never really worked with. And so I typically just correct on the fly like I did right here. But we now have something that's more consistent with the line work. And I prefer the 3 line width compared to 4 when it comes to the outside design of the character. So I'm going to pause here, and up next, we're going to keep working on refining the lines. For this video, I'm working off of 28 chadvector.moho. Feel free to open up this file. We're now going to go in and just refine some of the line work a little bit more, just so it's more appealing before we wrap up. So first, let's focus on the hair. You can see here I went in and added some line work to help with the curves, but as I continue to look at this, I'm wondering if I should do something a little bit different. So coming in here, I just want to take a look at this. I'm thinking about maybe dipping these curves down a little bit more and perhaps coming in and just refining this part of the curve and kind of bringing it up more like that. And then we can come in here and work on this curve by bringing that up. And again, this will require just going in using the Alt key and moving your Bezier handles around, just like that. Then we have this little dip. So continuing on, I'm just going to raise that one up. And I might come in here and actually remove those lines. I don't really need those. And then we have something that's looking more like that. I can then come in and just shrink this up a little bit, refine this bump more, perhaps just bring it up a little bit like that. And I might come down here and also just correct some of these bumps just so they look a little bit more appealing. And also looking at this, I'm going to remove this line right here. There's really no reason to have it since we already have one right there. And then, looking at some of this line work, I feel like it could be a little bit more pointed right here. Again, to create some more definitive curves, kind of like we have it on the top here. So just come in and we can bring those out. And once again, we can bring these down, and let's grab this point and bring it up. That'll help us with the Beziers here. So we can kind of go up like that. And I might add a second or third point to that bottom line, just so I can bend it over. And again, just refining this a little bit more. And I could also add additional line work just by looking at this here. But first, let me just correct some of these other bends a little bit. And you got to be careful. If you correct it too much, you might have to go in and alter your shading as well. But I think rounding that off is going to work. Maybe come in and round this one off a little bit more. Maybe kind of bring it down like that, just so it's not so symmetrical with the other side. And the hair doesn't really connect to the head at this point. So I'm going to grab it and just bring it down to have it connect. And then I can kind of bring up the strand of hair like that, or even placing it like this should work. And then coming in with the curvature tool, you can make any corrections you feel are necessary. But I think that should be okay. And I might just smooth this one out a little bit. Just to add a little bit more variety. So kind of down like that. And that's looking, I would say, a little bit better. But now I could also go in and maybe add a little bit more line work just to places that I feel could benefit from it. So maybe at the end here, I could add a little bit of something like that. And on these ends, I could even come in and just add some lines like that. So by going in, we have altered some of the shapes, and just how the design is looking. I'm going to take the Create Shape tool, select all the points, making sure that the width is set to 3. We're on stroke. I can create the shape. And now if we look, we can see those lines are filled in. And overall, I think the details pop more, and I think it's going to work. My only little thing is I might come in and just bring this part down just a little bit. There we go. So now with the hair looking better, I'm going to go down to the ponytail and just make some other tweaks. By looking at this, I feel like I could come in and just bend some of the lines a little bit more. And we could even add in some other line work if we wanted to, but I think just by coming up here and kind of doing what I did before with the bends, I'm just going to remove some of these lines. I think I might have added in too many detail lines in some of these spots, and just kind of bring things back. I'm going to remove all this too. And that's looking a little bit better. So bring it up, and there we go. So again, just a little bit of polishing here and there. You can also play around with the curvature tool. Again, just to make sure that everything is the way you want it. The other thing I want to correct or polish up is the mouth. So going into the mouth layer here, let me just go into the head, locate the mouth, and let's go to the teeth first. I just want to add a little bit more detail to what I'm doing with the mouth. So taking the Add Point tool, I can come in and just add a couple points, perhaps 4 points total, just to add those. And I can bring this up a little bit. Again, to add a little bit of something more to the teeth and just what's going on here. So something like that. And if you want, you could even go in and try to round this off and see how that looks. I can grab my Bezier handles here. There we go. So you can just do a little bit of a round edge like that, just for some variety. And then for the bottom teeth, I'm going to do something else as well. Coming in here and taking a look, I might just add a couple of points like this. And I'm going to try to wrap the teeth around kind of like this, just a little bit. Not too much, but again, just to kind of add a little bit more depth to what's going on. And actually, maybe I'll try something like this. So come down, maybe back a little bit like that. And then taking the curvature tool, I can come in and I'm just going to kind of round some things off like so. Kind of make it look like the teeth are going back a little bit into the mouth. So something like that. And I can do the same on the other side. So let's just add a few points. And I'm going to bring this one down. And this one down. We can kind of morph it over like so. And up. And then, once again, take the curvature tool and just round things out. And we can bring that a little bit closer. Maybe, actually, let's scoot that back a little bit. We're going to move the tongue, I think. So now with the teeth arranged like that, I'm going to grab that tongue, and we're just going to move it back a little bit, just so it's a little bit more offset. And we can also add a little bit more detail to the tongue as well. Let's just come in here and add a couple points like that. Actually, I'm going to undo that. And before I add those points, uncheck sharp corners. That way it doesn't deform as much when I come in and do this. And I'm just going to bring these over and kind of dip it a little bit like that. Bring this down. kind of get it situated, and then maybe come in and add a line to the tongue. So something like that. And then we can create our shape. I'm just going to create a stroke line. I can click off, and that's looking a little bit better. Again, more refined, I would say. The bottom teeth are still not really correct. Let me just come down really quick, and I think I just need to move these points. In a little bit. So perhaps like that, and then just take the tongue and take that little part right there and scoot it in. There we go. That's looking a little bit better. And we could go into, and you could add some shading and different things to the mouth. But I think for right now, what we've done there helps with the form of it. And I believe all the other areas are looking good. So if we come down here, we can see that everything except the hands, I think, is shaping up to look good. The last thing we can do is just come in and skim the body to make sure there's no anomalies. Once again, with that collar, you can see we have something going on right there. I seem to always have to adjust it every couple videos, but that's okay. It's just kind of how this whole thing works. Let's just bring it up like that. So that way we don't have that awkward transition. Everything's looking a little bit more solid. And we can now move down. All the line work is looking good, except maybe for this part right here. If I come down here to the coat and look at the coat details, I feel like I could straighten this out a little bit more so it looks more in line with the top one. And then for this line, I'm just going to add a second point and create a slight bend. And I think that'll help with that line. So now if we come back out here, and actually I might move that one down just a little bit, things are looking better. And so those are the types of details you should be paying attention to. Make sure the shading and everything is lining up. As you can see, we have different shades on the collar and on the body, but it sort of all connects, especially here with the arm. It just kind of keeps going down. And so having that nice consistent shade is also something that you would like to pay attention to when working in this final phase. So with all that, I think we are looking pretty good. So we're going to pause here, and up next, we'll focus on polishing up the hands. For this video, I'm working off of 29 Chad Vector. Feel free to open up this file. If we zoom back in, we can now focus on the hands. And we don't have to do too much here. I just realize that they could use some more work. So let's come over here to the layers, and I want to locate the front hand layer, which is underneath body. So right here, click on front hand, and the first thing I want to do is adjust the size of the middle finger. It should be longer than the index finger. So we're just going to bring it down like that. I'm not quite sure why I missed that the first time around. But also, using the curvature tool, I'm just going to come in here and refine things a little bit. So let's kind of bring things down like that. Point the fingers out a little bit more. And then just kind of move some things around. Can put that right about there. And just bring this down. And then I might actually just move everything in a little bit like that. And kind of bring it out. And I would say that's looking a little bit more appropriate. The other thing we could do, and this is something you could do anywhere, but if we take what is called the line width tool, I could go in and point by point here, reduce the lines, so that way it looks like it kind of tapers off and it's not as bunched up. So if we click off and we look at it, you can see it looks something like that. But I'm just going to play with this a little bit more. Maybe add in a second point right here, and then come in and adjust the curvature of that. So I can bring it back like that. And then we can bring the pinky down like so. Kind of make a rounded off shape like that. Okay. I would say that's looking better. The last thing I want to do here is just add in some details to help with the hand. So using the add point tool, I can turn off autofill for right now and leave auto weld on. I can come in and just start adding in these different details. Now again, it just depends on how you want to approach this, but I'm just going to come in and add some knuckles, just like this. And we can come in here and modify those shapes. About like that. And that should be pretty good. If we come in here now and use the Create Shape tool, I can select all those lines. Using stroke, we can create the shape. Now, these lines might be a little bit too thick, so let me come in here and reduce those to 2. And we can click off. The other thing you could do is come in and perhaps draw in some fingernails. So again, it just depends on how detailed you want to get with all this. But you can most definitely do something like that. If I come in here, we can just use the curvature tool and bend things around. Perhaps create a second point right here that we can kind of bring up like that. And you could just kind of bring it up as far as you want. So maybe right there. And then we can use the Create Shape tool. And we just want to select the points that are involved with the fingernail. So just like that. And we can use both. I'll come over here to fill and choose white, but let's just reduce the opacity and then click OK. And then I can create the shape and kind of see what it looks like. I might come in here and actually reduce these details to 1 for all of it, actually, for the wrinkle, for the knuckles, and for the nail. And you can see now I have something that looks like that. So from here, we could just quickly copy and paste this stuff if we wanted to. And just come in and quickly lay down some fingernails. Again, if you want that detail. So again, we could just kind of do something like this. And then just copy and paste it and bring it over. Modify it a little bit. And you can just keep going. And then we'll just shrink that one up. Put it in there. So now, from a distance, the hand has more detail. And it's looking a little bit better. So now, for the other hand, we could come in and just apply some different tricks. But first, let me come down and using my Transform Points tool, I want to once again adjust the shape, perhaps apply another point, and then come in here with the curvature tool and just try to round things out a little bit more, create a more pleasing looking hand here. And the thumb can act a little bit different for this one, so maybe we can bring the thumb in a little bit more like that. And let's see here, taking this point, we can just kind of bring it in like so. And then just kind of adjust everything here. Again, creating a more natural bend for everything. And we can come in and also reduce the size. Kind of like we did with this one. And we can also just bring it over and kind of eyeball it to make sure that it's going to match the size as close as we can. We want it to look a little bit different, so we're just kind of playing around with this. There we are. We can bring it back like so. And then, once again, using the curvature tool, you can come in here and adjust how all of this is currently shaping up, just kind of like that. And then instead of nails, we're going to see some other attributes. Perhaps we could add a thumb line like so. And then maybe just coming in here, we can add some lines like this to the palm. Just kind of like that. And you could add more. Maybe we'll just add one more, kind of like this. So now, taking the Create Shape tool, we'll come in and set the stroke to 1 and create that shape. And now we have some details that look like this. And we can also go in and tweak those details until we get it exactly where we want it. So something like this, maybe down a little bit like that. And then just taking the curvature tool, I might bring these things in a little bit more. There we go. So now you have something that looks like that. Again, you have two different sides of your hands and they're set up a little bit differently. Again, you could continue to play around with this. Maybe we want to space out the fingers a little bit more, or perhaps you want to go in and tighten up the fingers on the other hand. It just kind of depends on how you want to approach it. Again, these are all things you can play around with. And as you can see, I could spend a great deal of time just tweaking all this. But that's looking better than where it was at. At least we now have some differences with the hands. That's all we need to do. I'll pause here, and up next, share my final thoughts.